Yeah, man, honestly, it was rough. From the start, I knew I was completely in love with my wife. The instant I saw her, it felt like lightning struck. But reaching the wedding aisle was anything but easy. At just 13, Jeff Bridges scrawled 3 words on his bedroom door, words that followed him for years. To the public, he looked like a Hollywood icon, but in private, Jeff carried a heavy secret. Before filming, panic attacks gripped him. He hid inside garages just to avoid his father. Even in his mid-70s, his pulse spiked to 148 on set, higher than when he was fighting cancer. Not long ago, he finally opened up during a huge awards event. His admission left the crowd in shock. That truth explained why he nearly gave up acting many times, and why celebrity life never sat right. Jeffrey Leon Bridges entered the world on December 4, 1949. With both parents in Hollywood, his childhood was filled not with lullabies, but with cameras and sound stages. At only 6 months old, his parents carried him to his first film shoot. That movie, The Company She Keeps, was released in January 1951. The director needed a baby who could really cry. Actress Jane Greer gave Jeff a quick pinch, and he wailed on cue. The take worked perfectly. On the studio logs, he wasn't even named, just listed as Crying Baby. Years later, Jeff joked that his first earnings probably paid for formula and diapers. Without realizing it, his career in Hollywood began before he ever spoke a word. As time went on, Jeff's father, Lloyd Bridges, grew conflicted about the industry. Lloyd had fame, especially after High Noon, but never fully trusted the business. Around 1957 or 1958, he gathered Jeff and his brother Beau for a blunt talk. He explained that most actors made under $5,000 yearly. To prove it, he showed them real numbers. From then on, grades mattered more than auditions. Acting jobs were only allowed if they kept at least a B+. He even suggested engineering as a safer path. That household rule stuck, making Jeff question fame itself. It sparked a quiet doubt that maybe acting was too unstable. But at 13, Jeff felt a shift. He was tired of being only Lloyd's son. So, in 1963, he grabbed a marker and wrote "Not an Actor" across his bedroom door. He signed up for art classes at Brentwood and sold his first painting for $35 on August 9, 1964. He also kicked off a surf rock band called The Nozzles, performing at small local fairs. While Beau memorized acting lines, Jeff was learning guitar riffs and paint techniques. His high school art trophies from 1966 still sit in his studio today. For him, this wasn't just a hobby. It was his way of making a statement. He refused to walk a path simply because it was open. He wanted to carve out something that felt real. Yet 1960s Los Angeles offered more than music and art. It was also wild with parties and drugs. By 16, Jeff was smoking pot before math class. By summer 1967, he was experimenting with LSD in the canyons of Topanga. On September 3rd of that year, police pulled him over. They found a roach inside his Beetle. Because he was underage, they called his father instead of locking him up. That incident rattled his family. His mother set him up with weekly therapy. Lloyd even drove him to 2 rehab sessions in Malibu that October. He would later say it felt like he was missing the exit ramp of life. That scare became his first real wake-up call. The lectures weren't sinking in, so Lloyd tried another approach. One morning in early 1968, over breakfast, he framed it differently. Acting could be a passport to everything: flying planes, painting, making music, without enlisting or joining a band. Just one profession with endless roles. That thought stayed with Jeff. It painted acting as a form of freedom instead of a trap. Soon after, he accepted a small part on his father's TV series Sea Hunt. Part of the reason was just to buy a new Stratocaster. Lloyd's trick had worked. Jeff stepped into acting, but the idea of freedom through the craft stayed forever. Still, he didn't leap fully into Hollywood. On May 12, 1967, at only 17, Jeff entered a military office and signed with the Coast Guard Reserve. The commitment lasted 8 years. It spared him from Vietnam, but it slowed his acting career. His weekends were spent cleaning buoys and working overnight shifts. He described the job as torture. Yet the breaks allowed him to film between duties. That's when he landed The Last Picture Show in 1971 and Thunderbolt and Lightfoot in 1974, both earning Oscar nominations. He wore his uniform while chasing Hollywood success. In 1975, he ended his military service. By coincidence, that same year, America ended the draft. Back in 1967, Jeff had also ridden a Greyhound to New York to train at the Herbert Berghof studio. Known for its tough instruction, the school didn't impress him much. Instead, Jeff spent time in the city's music clubs and art scene. He carried a panoramic camera, capturing subway life while mingling with painters and musicians. He would duck rehearsals just to perform at Café Waz open mic. After only a few months, he returned home. But those weeks gave him a line he used whenever his parents doubted his path. Proof he had taken acting seriously. And even with an Oscar nod, Jeff nearly walked away for good. Back in 1972, Jeff picked up a Malibu beach house and a Venice studio, not for acting, but to paint seascapes and make music. He wasn't chasing record labels or gallery walls. All he wanted was breathing room. He even told his father he might sit out on the next films. Out of nowhere, great parts began arriving. His pause didn't last. By the following year, his hints about quitting had the whole family on edge. They gathered together in the living room. Dorothy, the steady heart of the household, opened her notebook filled with Jeff's auditions and roles. Lloyd reminded him that acting could draw on everything he loved. Dorothy chimed in, saying the family was rowing as one boat, and they needed him paddling too. Soon after, Jeff accepted a part in The Iceman Cometh, the same film he'd tried to refuse. The director even went to his studio to win him over. That little nudge pulled him back into the spotlight. In the summer of 1975, at just 25, Jeff was filming a quirky comedy called Rancho Deluxe in Paradise Valley, Montana. One day, as he sat in the Chico Hot Springs Hotel, a woman caught his eye walking across the dining room. She had 2 black eyes and a healing nose, but he couldn't stop looking. He stumbled through his lines. The crew laughed every time he flubbed a take. Between scenes, he asked her to dinner. Her answer was no. Her name was Susan Jestin, an economics student working the resort to earn money. She told him, "No, but maybe we'll bump into each other. This place is small." That moment wouldn't leave him. 3 nights later, they shared a dance at the wrap party. It was clumsy, but sweet. By morning, they were already checking out ranches by the water. Jeff still keeps a photo from that day tucked in his wallet. He calls it his time machine back to the moment he knew he'd met the one. In 1976, Paramount put him in King Kong as Jack Prescott. At $24 million, it was the priciest film ever attempted. Promotion alone ate up over $8 million. The studio promised big bonuses if earnings cleared $60 million worldwide. Few expected it, but opening weekend brought $7 million from under 1,000 theaters, the largest December debut ever. Within 10 days, it topped $26 million. By the end, it passed $90 million. That triumph carried a burden. For nearly 2 years, Jeff was tied to interviews, ads, and contract disputes. He joked that the giant ape hadn't just grabbed a woman, it had grabbed his bank account and wouldn't release it. Then came 1977. Through the whirlwind, Susan never left his side. One afternoon she told him, "I'll have kids and settle down, with you or without you." That shook him. It happened on a Monday, By midweek, he was pacing their cottage, unsure if family meant losing freedom. He even phoned Beau in tears. On Thursday, he drove Susan to a windy Zuma beach. Pulling a turquoise ring from his jeans, he proposed. 5 days later, June 5, 1977, they were married. The ceremony was simple, a backyard wedding with her Lutheran pastor. Jeff would later say her ultimatum saved him from drifting into ruin. Instead, he anchored. He remembered Paradise Valley and the peace he felt there. The morning after that first dance, he and Susan had toured a farmhouse near the Yellowstone River. Jeff recalled a voice inside saying, "Don't lose this place or this woman." By 1979, he purchased 320 acres outside Livingston. On it, he built a plain cedar cabin without a phone so Hollywood couldn't reach him. In a 1977 New York Times interview, he admitted dodging auditions to paint and fish. His agent called it career suicide. Sometimes Jeff even demanded huge salaries to scare studios off. Instead, they kept sending offers. That cabin, he said, became his escape hatch. Whenever Hollywood grew too loud, he'd vanish into Montana. He'd mend fences, sit by the river, and fade from view for weeks. Still, his family tugged at him. His father, Lloyd, had more than 150 credits. Lloyd once told the press he never pushed his kids. But when Jeff began turning down hits, he called it wasting talent. That stung. Jeff admitted it cut deep because his dad had always lifted him up. Industry papers like Variety insisted Jeff was one step from stardom if he'd only commit. So he struck a bargain with himself. He'd take serious parts, but only if he could retreat to Montana after. One of those choices was Cutter's Way in 1981. He said it let him show his father he valued acting, just not above peace. That same year came Tron. At 31, Jeff found himself facing technology he barely grasped. Though only 15 to 20 minutes used digital effects, it felt like the future was already here. Even Disney animators avoided it, afraid computers might replace them. The Academy refused it a visual effects nomination, saying computers were cheating. Jeff grew uneasy. During prep, he even asked the director if computers might one day replace actors too. His tense expression on screen wasn't an act, it was fear. Later, he joked Tron left him glancing over his shoulder at every monitor he saw. By 1984, the challenge got deeper. For Starman, he had to embody an alien learning to be human. He stripped away every habit. No leaning, no lazy posture, no unconscious blinks. He studied a dancer to shape his movements, spending 115 days slowly becoming more human for the camera. Critics praised him. An Oscar nod followed, but afterward, he barely recognized himself. He sought therapy to find his own identity again. For nearly a year, he visited a Santa Monica therapist weekly, searching for the real Jeff. Then, in 1985, he filmed Jagged Edge with Glenn Close. The steamy scenes stirred attention, especially the beach house moment. Tabloids plastered the photos. Susan was far from pleased. After a decade of tolerating on-set flirting, this crossed a line. She warned him, "One more like that and I'm out." Dinners grew tense, and jokes from friends landed badly. Jeff later admitted the film nearly wrecked their marriage. Trouble wasn't only on screen. While filming Against All Odds in 1983-84, Jeff spent long stretches isolated in Mexico. Reporters began likening him to Newman and Redford. The weight crushed him. By 2011, he confessed he'd been drinking heavily back then. Hot nights, tequila, too much. One journalist even saw him throw up mid-interview. Jeff said that was when booze stopped being fun. It began running his life. Then came the Fabulous Baker Boys. Cast in 1988, Jeff requested piano lessons, hoping music could be his backup. He woke at dawn for practice. He studied Bill Evans. He even rehearsed miming to recordings. He threw himself into it. But when the movie hit on October 13, 1989, it exploded. Great reviews, 2 Oscar nominations, huge praise. His escape plan backfired. Instead of freeing him, the success bound him tighter to Hollywood. Jeff laughed later, saying the piano had become his trap, one chord at a time. By 1990, he was sharing the set with Robin Williams in The Fisher King. Robin improvised non-stop, take after take, sometimes 20 straight. Jeff couldn't predict what came next. One night on the Bowery, Robin launched into a wild medieval rant. Jeff froze, missing his cue. At 2:15 a.m., rattled, he left set, found a payphone, and called Susan. He admitted he felt shaken enough to need therapy. Studio records confirm insurance covered one emergency session on July 27, 1990. Across his 60-year career, it was the only time Jeff billed therapy to a film. 8 years later, on March 6, 1998, The Big Lebowski premiered. It barely made a dent at first, but by 2002, midnight screenings were packed. Fans shouted dialogue back at the screen. Jeff thought it amusing. Then, things turned strange. On April 20, 2005, a parody religion called Dudism appeared. Within a decade, it had over 600,000 so-called priests. At a 2007 LA event, fans lined up for Jeff to bless their white Russians. The attention unsettled him. He admitted it was flattering, but some treated him like he really lived in that robe. After 2008, he stopped attending Lebowski Fest. He said strangers even followed him into bathrooms. They weren't after autographs, they wanted wisdom. When the DVD dropped in 1999, his daughters weren't impressed. Isabel was 18, Jessica 16, and Haley 14. Out of nowhere, his kids' classmates were plastering the Dude Abide stickers across lockers. On May 21, 1999, at dinner, they handed Jeff a note they'd written themselves. At the top it said, "Why it's weird, you're famous." They explained how classmates mocked them over his constant swearing. They asked him to please get a normal office job like everyone else's dad. Jeff tucked the note away. In 2014, he pulled it out in an interview and smiled. He admitted the harshest reviews always came from his family. By 2000, Jeff decided to take a new risk. He stepped in as producer on The Contender, a political thriller. He wanted more say over what he worked on, but things quickly slipped away. DreamWorks stepped in, recut the movie, and released their own version. Gary Oldman and his producing partner were outraged. They claimed the edits pushed a partisan message. Newspapers ran with the drama. The film cost $20 million to make. It only returned $17.9 million. Jeff played the U.S. president, but most days were spent fending off political backlash. Later, he admitted the stress nearly killed his joy for acting. He walked away knowing politics on film can drain you to the bone. Nearly a decade later, in 2009, Jeff almost walked past the role that gave him an Oscar. Crazy Heart followed the collapse of a washed-up country singer named Bad Blake. At first, Jeff rejected it. He said he was exhausted from playing broken men. Scott Cooper, the director, refused to give up. Jeff only changed his mind when T-Bone Burnett joined the team. His condition was simple. He'd only do it if he sang his own songs. The film was shot for $7 million, but brought in $39.5 million. It went on to win 40 awards. Jeff said just remembering it still gives him chills. That close call haunted him for years. A reluctant yes had changed his career. At the 2010 Oscars, when he clutched the golden statue, something inside cracked open. He looked up and thanked his parents. His voice shook. He called acting a groovy way to live. The words sounded raw, not rehearsed. They carried weight. Backstage, he joked the statue wouldn't erase the dude, and deep down, he knew that was right. To the audience, it looked like pure happiness. To those closest, it sounded like long-awaited relief. After 40 years, Jeff finally seemed at peace with himself. Later that same year, the Coen brothers called about True Grit. They wanted him to embody Rooster Cogburn. Jeff said no 3 times. John Wayne's shadow loomed too large in his mind. The role frightened him. The Coens swore they weren't redoing the '69 classic, they were adapting the novel. That promise won him over. After shooting Wrapped, Jeff confessed something unexpected. He said refusing them earlier had been one of his biggest mistakes. The movie scored 10 Oscar nominations. Critics praised his rougher take on Rooster. It showed even icons battled out, but confronting fear can sometimes create something timeless. Back in 1994, Jeff had another vision. He wanted to adapt The Giver for the screen. His dream was to cast his father, Lloyd Bridges, as the lead. That was why he bought the rights, but studios brushed him off. They argued no teen would watch a story led by a 60-year-old man. Jeff refused to quit. By 2013, Harvey Weinstein finally agreed to back it, and Jeff was now old enough to play the role himself. He laughed, saying the wrinkles finally fit the part. On August 15, 2014, after more than 7,000 days, The Giver hit theaters. Its opening weekend earned $12.3 million. It didn't break records, but for Jeff it felt like both closure and a fresh start. He had rewritten the script 18 times, cycled through 4 directors, and finally seen it through. But movies weren't his only calling. In 1983, at just 34, Jeff launched the nonprofit End Hunger Network. While fans watched him on the big screen, he quietly fought childhood hunger. In 2010, standing at the National Press Club, he warned that 17 million American kids went to bed hungry each night. He called the work his penance, complaining about Hollywood while kids had no meals. Over the decades, his group helped push through 5 major food bills. In 2015, he even dropped an ambient album, Sleeping Tapes, donating its $80,000 to No Kid Hungry. Even on film tours like True Grit, he stayed behind to press lawmakers about summer meal programs. He liked to joke that his Oscar was useless as a soup spoon, but this fight for others never prepared him for the battle that came in 2020. That October, at 70, Jeff tweeted just one line. He had been diagnosed with follicular non-Hodgkin lymphoma, a blood cancer. A tumor in his belly measured 9 by 12 inches. For months, he'd brushed off fatigue and weight loss as pandemic stress. He started chemo at once, 6 rounds combined with antibody therapy. Meditation became his daily anchor. 11 months later, scans showed the tumor had shrunk to just 2 centimeters. By August 2021, it was down to marble size. A month later, Jeff revealed he was in remission. To celebrate, he walked a mile without his oxygen tank for the first time since treatment began. But chemo wasn't the end. In January 2021, halfway through his 4th round, Jeff caught COVID. His immune system was already battered. Within days, his oxygen levels collapsed. He was rushed into ICU in Santa Barbara, where he stayed 5 weeks. His lungs were shredded. Standing lasted only 45 seconds. Step by step, nurses built him back up, first sitting, then walking 5 feet, then more. He lost 35 pounds and nearly all his hair. Doctors later said his early vaccine likely saved his life. Jeff told friends cancer felt easier than COVID, but the virus revealed how fragile life is. While isolated in the ward, Jeff asked a nurse to bring him 2 shoeboxes of letters. They had been written by his mother, Dorothy. One night alone, he read through them and discovered something shocking. His parents' 58-year marriage had nearly collapsed in 1969. Lloyd had left to film a Western and even filed early divorce papers. Jeff never knew. The letters spilled anger, sorrow, and then the fragile healing that began with a postcard. Let's try again for the kids. By then, Jeff had been married to Susan for 43 years. He had always assumed his parents' love was unshakable. Now he understood it differently. He began talking more openly with Susan about fear, money, gratitude. He said those letters reset his entire direction. But recovery carried a heavy price. Between chemo, ICU, and oxygen care, his medical bills topped $3 million. He hadn't prepared for that. To keep his union health coverage, he had to return to work. That brought him back to The Old Man, an FX drama that began shooting in 2020 before the pandemic. It was delayed again after his cancer, costing the studio $1.5 million. By October 2021, when filming restarted, Jeff still needed oxygen support. He could only film for 45 seconds at a stretch before resting. Strangely, the set he once dreaded became the job that funded his recovery. The Old Man finally aired on June 16, 2022. Critics praised his raw, weary performance. It wasn't acting, it was survival on screen. Then came April 29, 2024. Jeff walked on stage at Alice Tully Hall to accept the 49th Chaplin Award. Instead of a standard thank you speech, he stunned the audience. He admitted, "I never actually wanted to be an actor." The room froze. He told the story of hiding in the garage as a teenager, too panicked to rehearse with his father. He read a journal entry. "Acting feels like wearing someone else's skin. Itchy and wrong." For 6 seconds, no one moved. Then applause erupted, echoing through the hall. Even now, nearly 75, the fear hasn't left him. In March 2025, while filming Tron Ares, his pulse spiked to 148 beats per minute, higher than during chemo. On shoot days, he wakes at 4 a.m., convinced he'll forget every line. He told reporters, "The fear's louder than the tumors ever were." And this time, he wasn't exaggerating.